So Kant thinks he's given us the only tool we need, at least so far, to figure out what our duty is, and that's the categorical imperative. So the categorical imperative says I ought never to act except in such a way that I can also will that my maxim, the reason I'm acting, should become a universal law. He's given us an example that says I can never make a false promise, I can never lie when I say I'm going to pay back your money, your loan for example, because not because it would be wrong just for me to do it, but because it would be wrong for anyone in my situation to do it. And so we always need to ask, what would happen if everyone did that? And if it would be bad if everyone did that in the same circumstances, then I shouldn't do it. Basically, this means I don't get special exceptions for myself. We might wonder, though, why should I worry about what if everyone did that if not everyone is doing that? Right? Why shouldn't I consider this sort of on a case-by-case basis instead? Well, Kant's going to have a couple of answers, but you might not be all that satisfied. So, first he wants to talk about why we should actually do philosophy in this way. And he's going to say the reason is we have a serious internal struggle going on. Our instincts want us to be self-serving, right? My natural inclination is, well, I ought to, do what I want, get what's best for me. Duty, though, requires us to follow the categorical imperative. So we need to do practical philosophy, something like ethics, to figure out what we should actually do. And doing practical philosophy like this helps us figure out the right balance between caring for ourselves, following our instincts, and getting what we need, and doing our duty. But, he's going to say, it is awfully hard to imagine anyone actually doing all of their duty. We know that we're not perfect people, so why should we pretend like we ought to be, instead of doing something even more practical? Is the categorical imperative even applicable? Well, Kant's going to say yes. He wants to compare reality versus duty, and he wants to show you that duty is still the most important thing. So he will admit we can never be absolutely sure that even I, let alone anybody else, even when I'm thinking about why I'm doing things, I can't be sure that I'm acting for my duty every time, because I might have some other deep, unconscious motivation, right? It could be a really deep down internal instinct or something like that. So if I can't even be sure that I'm doing the right thing, why should I expect and require other people to do that too? Well, Kant's going to say, it seems like maybe we shouldn't, but of course I should, because even if we never do, or even if we're never sure that people actually act the right way, it's still the law. It's still what we should do. In the moral law, what we ought to do applies to everyone, no matter what. Even, he's going to say, to any other non-humans that are rational. And he's not thinking here about dolphins or chimpanzees. He's thinking about if some other rational beings were to show up, right? Say they're Martians, and we find that they're rational. We can apply this to them too, just because they're rational. This is your duty. Your duty comes from reason. And so Kant's going to say, even if we know that people aren't likely to follow their duty very well, even then, we still need to hold them to their duty. But we can temper this with realism a little bit. So if we ask, well, shouldn't we be a little more realistic, Kant? He'll say, well, yes and no. He's going to say we need to do things sort of in a specific order. So what we need to do first is manage the ideal part. We need to figure out what the best sorts of people would do. What's your real moral duty? And once we figured that out, now we can do the realistic part. So once we know what the real moral law is, what our absolute perfect duty is, then we can deal with practical stuff like politics, daily life, individual decisions, things like that. The real moral law, though, he's going to say, what you really ought to do, has nothing to do with what's practical and what's convenient. So what's really right for Kant? Well, he's going to say the moral truth can't be based on anything empirical. And we'll notice this is a pretty far cry from people like Locke, Hume, Berkeley, etc., right? These were empiricists. They think that we need to find everything from what's empirical, what's out there in the world. Kant's going to say, no, it's all based on reason. You can do this with pure reason. So no matter what happens in the world, we can figure out what our duty is. And we can only do, according to the categorical imperative, what we could want everyone to do in the same situation. And if it ends up that our duty conflicts with common sense morality, oh well. Here are a couple of potential objections. We know Kant says we can never tell a lie. But what if lying would be good for us? We'll run through this and one more potential objection in our last video.